Thank you for listening to this podcast from TRE, Talk Radio Europe, your voice in Spain and around the world. For more information, please visit TRE.radio.
Discuss, challenge, inform, comment, viewpoint on Talk Radio Europe.
Giles Brown.
Live comment and discussion with studio guests. Viewpoint.
It is Tuesday, the 13th of August. Welcome to the summer version of Viewpoint. We normally have a panel of invited guests. This morning we do things a little bit differently during this the season of maddening crowds. So we are joined in the studio by a guest, and we're going to have a quick flick through the papers and discuss the topics that are making the front pages and whatever else is crossing our radar. That is in the first hour, and if you want to get involved with the show, 952 78 4000 is the phone number. In the second half of the show, do something a little bit different, if you like, a discussion point, but I will be speaking to Colin Elliott, I think it's going to be, or talking about the Muslim world. It's an interview that I did a little earlier on in the year. If you want to get involved with today's shows, then these are the numbers.
To contact TRE, please call 952 78 4000. Email studio@tre.radio. Send us a WhatsApp on +34 645 99 67 95. Message us on Facebook, Talk Radio Europe Official, or tweet us at TRE Talk Radio.
And I'm joined in the studio by Tim Stafford. Good morning to you, Tim.
Good morning, Giles.
How are you doing? Are you surviving the summer?
The summer, yes. I like the sun and
yes.
Yes, and the ladies have their bikinis concealed.
Right. Okay, fine. Let's move swiftly on from that and look at the front. Thank you, Tim. I wasn't expecting that. 952 78 4000 if you should take issue with Tim straight off the bat today. Blimey, it's like watching The 100 with you sometimes. Let's look at the front pages. Let's look at the front pages of the papers this morning. Okay. The front pages, blood on their hands. A number of the papers react to the report on the failings of the treatment of the Nottingham attacker Valdo Calocane. Blood on their hands is the headline in the Daily Mail, quoting the reaction of the families. The paper describes the finding as devastating. The Daily Mirror's front page says, alongside Calocane's mugshot, they were told he could kill. Emma Webber, whose teenage son Barnaby was amongst those three people stabbed to death, tells the Fund that she felt visceral and genuine shock when reading the report. Describing Calocane as evil, twisted and vicious, she accuses mental health services of washing their hands of him, leaving him free to carry out the attacks. The Eye reports that the government is drawing up plans to evacuate British nationals from across the Middle East in the event that an Iranian attack on Israel triggers a wider war in the region. Whitehall sources tell the paper that officials are really, really concerned about what they call an uncontrollable move towards escalation. According to the Daily Telegraph, such a strike could come within days, possibly before the Gaza ceasefire talks resume on Thursday. A former Home Secretary, James Cleverly, tells the Daily Express that the government needs to get a grip and fast on illegal migration after more than 700 people crossed the Channel in a single day. The Conservative leadership, hopeful, accuses Sir Keir Starmer of doing nothing to stop the boats. Downing Street insists it is working to smash the gangs responsible. According to the Telegraph, one way Sir Keir is planning to do that is by working with his Italian counterpart, Giorgia Meloni. The paper says he's expressed support for Ms Meloni's plans to overhaul the EU's police force to make it focus on tackling people smuggling. Sir Keir is said to have floated the idea of officers from the UK conducting joint operations with Europol. Sources tell the Financial Times that Chancellor Rachel Reeves is considering turning to the private sector to pay for a £9 billion highway and tunnel crossing the Thames. The paper says that investors in the lower Thames crossing, which is due to link Kent and Essex, would receive returns from the toll road. The Guardian says that Labour MPs are closing their accounts on X, formerly known as Twitter, because of what they call the spread of hate and disinformation on the platform. One backbencher tells the paper the website has become a megaphone for foreign adversaries and far-right fringe groups, with an unnamed government minister saying they've cut down on posting on the site and are reluctant to return. And the Times reports on the dying out of an age-old British tradition: a trip to the pub after work. It highlights research by the think tank, the Work Foundation, which suggests that remote working and the tendency among some young employers to remain sober mean that companies should instead host breakfast socials and away days. But defending a post-work pint in its leader column, the paper says the pub remains the best place to let off steam, imbibe the wisdom of elders, and turn workmates into lifelong friends. Those headlines again from the top. Well, we have a call. Do we have a call in? Good grief, somebody's very quick off the bat. Probably to give you a hard time, Tim. So let's have a morning call. You're live on the summer more relaxed Viewpoint. What can I do? What can we do for you?
Perdón, mi inglés, my English is very, very little.
Okay.
La señorita Ana, o señora Ana.
Bueno, esto es el programa de desayuno. So
Perdón.
No pasa nada.
Perdón.
Vale, ok.
Bueno,
vale.
¿Cómo podría encontrar a Ana?
Vale, mejor que tú hablas con la secretaria con el recepcionista, ¿vale? Pero más tarde, ¿vale?
Muy bien.
Estamos directorio ahora mismo, ¿vale?
Vale, perdone.
Vale, no pasa nada. Vale, gracias. Pasa un buen día.
Gracias.
There you go. That's why I'm called the Giri Luth, because I speak very bad Spanish with a very big Andalus accent. Right then, back to the papers this morning. The Daily Mail, blood on their hands, as devastating reports lay bare failings of those treating psychotic Nottingham triple killer. Victims' furious families say health chiefs, doctors and the police have blood on their hands. Metro, they knew for 3 years he was a danger. Daily Telegraph, Starmer warns Iran no attack on Israel. And again, blood on the hands of the NHS staff who freed the Nottingham killer. The Times, Zelensky takes war to Putin. And they've also got breakfast socials, replace post-work pints. Elsewhere, The Guardian, silent killer heatwave in Europe claims 50,000 lives. Climate alarm as huge death toll from hottest year on record revealed. This is a story. Climate study suggests hot weather inflamed by carbon pollutions killed nearly 50,000 people in Europe last year. The Financial Times, they've got red alert, wildfires on the edge of Athens, but also Indian telecoms tycoon says swoop on Draghi's BT stake shows a faith in Britain. This is Indian billionaire Sunil Mittal's acquisition of 24.5% stake in British telecom giant BT. Meanwhile, the Mirror, they were told he could kill. Docs concerned 3 years before Nottingham hell. The UK plan to evacuate Brit nationals in Israel if Iran triggers war. The Daily Express leads with James Cleverly slams failure to halt crossings as 703 migrants arrive in a day. Get a grip and fast. Labour is doing nothing to stop the boats, they shout. And a picture of James Cleverly on the front. And finally, to some balance this morning, the Daily Star. And the Daily Star warns picnic lovers to beware of millions of invading German Lagerlaut wasps looking for a bit of mindless aggro. So their front page is just days after the Star warned that Britain was running low on striped picnic botherers. It is invasion of the angry, drunken German wasps. And those, for better or worse, are your headlines on this Tuesday, the 13th of August.
To contact TRE, please call 952 78 4000. Email studio@tre.radio. Send us a WhatsApp on +34 645 99 67 95. Message us on Facebook, Talk Radio Europe Official, or tweet us at TRE Talk Radio.
Live from the studios of TRE Talk Radio, your voice in Spain. Those are the ways to get involved. Joined by Tim Stafford. Tim, blood on their hands. This is the headline. This is this tragic headline that's making the front pages. We were all appalled by the killings of 2 students and a caretaker in Nottingham, the university students. My friend's daughter was at Nottingham, and they had a lockdown. It was the week before graduation, which was obviously shockwaves went throughout the university. And now it appears that the police, the NHS and other services who perhaps should have known better did nothing. I mean, as somebody who's worked in the field, in the legal field, it is appalling. But what do you think one can do, if anything? I mean,
well, I mean, as far as this particular individual is concerned, if at any time in front of, let us say, a GP or those in a hospital setting, some other police officers and so on, he gave the impression or indicated that he was going to be a danger to himself or to others, then he's giving them the license to section him and to remove his liberty. And the only other way in which his liberty could have been compromised was if he'd committed a crime sufficient that he could be incarcerated. So if he had given the impression that he constituted a danger to others, which it appears to be the case in this report, then it is neglectful that he wasn't detained. After all, in society, we are commonly on railway platforms and in common social settings among people who we have every reason to expect are not psychotic and of the right mind, sufficient that they don't constitute a danger. So there we are. It appears that several mistakes or several neglectful scenarios have arisen. This guy should not have been in society. He should have been treated for what it appears to be a pretty obvious psychosis.
One of the things that strikes me with this one is the fact that you have social services that are overstretched, that are that aren't able to respond, and this again, it's always tragic, but this one seems to have slipped below the net, and we are and perhaps we are seeing more of this. I mean, obviously we have the killings of the 3 young girls, which is horrendous and has triggered something else that we'll come on to a bit later on by an individual. We have a stabbing yesterday in Leicester Square of a mother and a child as well. I mean, you cannot, I suppose. Well, I suppose the saying is they can't track everyone. But the alarming thing with this particular case is that it seems that the murderer was known to be violent, was known to be to paraphrase a tabloid headline, a ticking time bomb, and that there really should have been something have been done quicker.
Yeah. There certainly appears to be a case for that in this case, that something should have been done, but it's not. This is a tip of the iceberg, really, because this guy suffering from a clear psychosis, a highly dangerous person, is one thing. There are others in society, in Britain at any rate, who commonly walk around, young people usually, with knives. They might suggest that they're carrying them for their own protection. But if you're going out carrying a weapon that can be deadly, you're showing some intent, and intent to use it, that is. It only takes one thrust of a knife in the right place to kill somebody. To actually manually dispose of somebody or kill somebody in that way, it takes an awful lot of effort and time, which gives enough sufficient time for people to prevent it. The knife-carrying offence is a serious one and should be addressed and given suitable punishment. That's one thing. Psychosis, underfunded social services, well, that is pussyfooting. There is an awful lot of pussyfooting around these things. The fear of being over harsh or judgmental or prejudiced in some way lends to people having a lack of action. This guy gave all the evidence and should have been incarcerated. There are many others, I'm sure, who should be detained in the same way. Not an inhuman way, detained in awful places, but treated kindly
But presumably, that there are checks and balances. You said earlier on in the conversation the individual should have been sectioned. But it's not a case of one person making that decision, is it? Presumably, there's a tribunal, a panel of experts. I mean, how does it? Well, in your experience, how does this work?
If a person, let us say, was in a hospital or in a GP setting in surgery, and indicated to that GP that they had strategized taking their own lives, or they can't control their thoughts sufficient that they feel as if they are going to do certain things to other people, then commonly a GP, for example, would bring in somebody else to witness those words, and at that point, the point of sectioning becomes clear. The doctor will simply sign and give us a short statement to that effect. The police would do the same. And as an emergency, this person will be taken into what one might call care.
952 78 4000 is the phone number if you want to get involved with this or any other topics. You've got something you want to get across your mind on Viewpoint. Some of the bits and pieces are coming in already. This is in from Jonesy. The most serious failure in the system was when the Judge and Home Office allowed the family to stay in the UK. All right. Why do a family containing a dangerous, mentally unstable male get permission to stay? The result has been the murders of people. Deport him home. There's a lot of people gleeping on about the fact that he wasn't British, which is an interesting one to see. 952 78 4000 is the phone number if you want to get involved with that and see where we go. With that. 952 78 4000. Going to take a short break and then back with more Viewpoint.
Viewpoint with
Giles Brown.
Back for more Viewpoint, joined in the studio by Tim Stafford, looking at the situation with the blood on their hands. Metro saying for 3 years they knew he was a danger, and as you said, knife crime is becoming, as you said, the whole issue of knives in society at the moment, because luckily in the UK and here in Spain we live in a gun-free culture in the way that it isn't in the United States. But how on earth are you going to stop people buying knives? I mean, carrying knives can be, it can be problematic as well. I know one case of somebody in Spain who works in film production, who was told that the multi-tool he had on his passenger seat could be construed as an offensive weapon, and so he had to put it in the back, locked away, so that he couldn't get to it. In the case of road rage, well, we are in the middle of summer. I mean, the roads are going to drive us a little bit, but the actual thing of saying, well, are you, but I suppose if young people are caught carrying knives, and then we get into the whole situation of, well, it's when do you search for knives? Because then we're back into stop and search, which is a huge civil liberties issue, and we had the famous sus laws in the 70s, which were disproportionately picking up groups of young West Indians. And but then I spoke to an ex-Metropolitan Police officer a couple of years ago and said, yeah, well, the problem was, Giles, that 9 times out of 10 we tended to find that was the case. Well, he said lighting blue touch paper and retiring. So,
yeah. Well, I think yes, these concealed weapons are going to be in our society until such time as those people, young or whatever age they might be, have been shown that the punishments for carrying offensive weapons of that kind are harsh, severe, and that as we commonly do in law enforcement and keeping the peace, as it were, it should be sufficient for them to cease and desist, or not to carry weapons of that kind. If you say, well, you're going to have a period of incarceration if you carry a weapon that it appears that you intend to use, which may cause serious injury or whatever, and a period of incarceration, well, they might be less likely. That's the most we can do, really. Unless stopping and searching is yes, very, very difficult. But if somebody's involved or gives the impression that they're about to commit an offence, there's a reasonable suspicion, and a search reveals that they are carrying weapons of that kind, then appropriate punishment should be meted out.
952-784-1000. Good morning to Gary, who says no one talks about the cultural aspects of knife crime. The big elephant in the room. The cultural aspects. Now.
What's that, shopping?
Go on, sorry, Tim.
Shopping vegetables? I don't know what the cultural
aspects of MasterChef. No, but seriously. Presumably, Gary, let me know about your culture. Just drop me a WhatsApp, please. Here we come. It's going to come in through. But... Yeah, and the other thing is, of course, this is predominantly a young... Well, it's gang thing. No, the lines went off for a minute then, and then they went quiet. Presumably, this is also a gang thing, a young man's crime, I would say, predominantly in these situations. This is carrying knives. And the problem with the youth, to use an expression that makes us both feel 105 years old, is the fact that they have they don't have I'm going to say no concept of right and wrong. Let me rephrase this, and luckily the phone's gone off. Morning, caller, you're live on TRE. What's your name, where are you calling from, or what is your summer viewpoint?
Yeah, good morning. It's John.
John, good morning to you.
On that thing about sus and stopping people, I can remember in the mid-1970s or thereabouts, the commander of Brixton Police Station, because he got so fed up with a group of society saying you're only stopping us and not the others, released the figures, for which he got into real serious trouble. But the figures were that 95% of all muggings were committed by young black youths on old white women, and about 3% were white people committing the crime, and 2% were the people who weren't sure. So 2%
were the what, sorry?
2% were like when people said, I'm not sure whether they were black or white.
Okay, right.
Attacked me. 95% were young black men or youths on old white women. Now, if you're going to stop somebody, you stop the people that might be committing the crime. For example, with white-collar crime in those days, you wouldn't have stopped a black man for like a bank fraud because they didn't really commit it. You would stop a white guy with a suit and a tie. So you stop the people that you think might be committing the crime.
But that's racial profiling, though, isn't it? That's the problem, isn't it? We're talking the 70s, so it was a different era. But racial profiling is again a very dangerous.
Hang on.
Oh, hang on. Yes.
When you're as a police officer, you look at all the facts. And the facts are like burglaries are happening between these hours or those hours, or robberies between whatever, and then you concentrate your effort on the things that you know. Okay, young black men commit the crime. You're not going to concentrate on white people, and if you do, 50-50, you're wasting resources. And that's not profiling them because they're black. They're profiling because they fit the ID of the people committing that sort of crime. And unfortunately, the same, I think, and I don't know because I've been retired for a long time, but it's stopping people carrying knives. As one sees on the news, an awful lot of people that get stabbed are young black men or youths, and they get stabbed by young black youths. So when the police stop somebody, they're hardly going to stop Mrs. Smith going to the post office. They're going to stop young black youths who might be carrying... It's a bit unfortunate for the young black youths, I agree, to the honest ones, but that's the reality of the situation.
And I suppose the thing is, it's better to have somebody stopped and inconvenienced than have another murder on our hands. That's the thing, isn't it, John? Huh?
Yeah, and the difficulty is, I know in my day, I was, because I'm 5'8" and not strongly built or whatever, I always relied on talking to people rather than ever thinking that I might use force.
Right.
I stopped people. I was always polite, believing that that's the way I would like to be approached. But I tell you now, stopping at that time, and things have changed because people have moved on in education, but stopping young black men at that time was a nightmare.
Right.
And frequently we just didn't do it. We said, it's not worth the effort, forget it.
I'm particularly impressed, by the way, the fact that whilst you were speaking as an ex-serving police officer, there was the sirens going off in the background there. So I'm presuming that's you live on a busy street and you don't have that playing as background ambience music during your day, John.
Yeah, I organised it.
Thank you for calling as always.
Just the other thing is that people carrying weapons and they say, I only carry them from protection. And I'm not entirely sure about today's law, but I think it's still more or less the same.
Yeah.
In my day, if you were carrying any item whatsoever, no matter how innocent it might be, if you said, I'm carrying it for protection, that weapon, that item became an offensive weapon for which you got arrested.
Tim is nudging sagely with that one. So thank you very much for calling. Got another caller. It'd be good to have you with us. Morning, caller. You're live on TRE. Thanks for holding. What's your viewpoint during the summer season?
Yes, morning, Giles. It's Gary here.
Morning, Gary. How are you, sir? I'm just seeing your WhatsApps. Thank you.
Just to add to what John said, his great experience. I had the same trouble when I evicted a burglar from my house, having assaulted me and my 3 children whilst I was on crutches. I was taken to court for that. The perpetrator was just given a caution,
right?
And because I didn't accept a caution, because I'm a bit of a dinosaur, I still believe you've got the right to protect yourself, your children and your house. And consequently, because I wouldn't accept a caution, I was taken to court, to Crown Court, over 8-month period, and the case was dropped half an hour before my mum's cremation. But the question, the reason I'm phoning in for, is the question is, why is it, and I hope this don't sound offensive, Giles, but why is it you and your ilk will not accept the real world? Peter said it last week about the Polish community, etc. Why is it you will not accept? Why is it you will not accept that there is no-go areas in England? Why is it you won't accept that?
My ilk. My ilk. Have I got an ilk, Gary? I'm.
Yes. Well, I nearly said welk.
My welk. Me and my welk. No, this no goes. Listen, I've spoken to police chiefs on my programs, my shows, and I've said, are there no-go areas?
I've heard it.
Yeah. Well,
I've heard it.
Right. So you.
I've heard.
Yeah.
Sorry, am I talking or you talking?
Yeah.
I've heard him say that, and I remember that.
Yeah.
And what John has just said, he said exactly the same to Mr. Gilmore many, many years ago. But when you're talking about chief inspectors, talk about the PCs and the sergeants, what they have to deal with at the rock face, so to speak. At the rock face. There's areas of Oldham, Bradford. We could all go on. You've heard it all before. People just we keep having the same conversation.
Right.
But until people accept it, we're not going to be able to move on. It might be a little bit controversial, but the past 2 weeks, I've been doing an awful lot of observations due to my medical condition, i.e. stuck at home. I've been doing an awful lot of. I like the culture wars and the news. I'm a news hound. I didn't see gangs of 100 and 200 people. I've got to be careful here, because you've got to be careful.
You were taught to be cautious.
Yes, always got to be careful. But I didn't see white people running through the streets with machetes. And all these incidents which involve knife crime, just look at it. Just look at what you're seeing. Just look. Now, I know this, in the current climate, this sounds far right and whatever, and again, we all know that old chestnut, but just look at it and just see the common denominator. If you don't want to see it, then fair enough, but don't tell me I'm not seeing it.
Okay, Gary. I mean, I'm not going to talk over you, and I'm like, you put your viewpoint across. All right. How's that, my friend?
Okay. Bye-bye then.
All right, then. Take care. 952784000 is the phone. I mean, I've spoken to police officers about no-go areas. I've spoken to police chiefs, and I've spoken to constables about no-go areas. There are areas that you would be uncomfortable with, but there are areas the police go because they're the police. But, you know, hey, here we go. If you are a serving police officer, if you have been a serving police officer, let me know. I can imagine that going into Brixton and going in the 70s and going into Portobello, Notting Hill Gate, Ladbroke Grove, for example, at that time of the 70s, was a damn sight more than now. There are areas of Seville that you wouldn't want to go into, I suppose. No, the Shredmi of Viviendas, which is an interesting situation as well. But hey, morning, we're live. You're live on TRE. What's your name? What's your summer viewpoint?
Yeah, sorry, I'll come back again. It's John Meehouse.
John.
Just to support Gary, I was on the investigation team of on the Broadwater Farm murder when Keith Blakelock was, when they tried to cut his head off.
Yeah.
That was a no-go area. There's no doubt about it.
You're
But
saying
we
the
investigated it.
Right.
We were from Scotland Yard. The main group that were investigating were, or the people in charge of the investigation, basically, we were from Scotland Yard, so we didn't know about the local situation. But when we read up the what they call the beat books, which was like the information that one officer writes down so the next officer coming on duty knows what happened.
Yeah.
When we read those, there's no doubt about it. The Broadwater Farm was a no-go area.
What, do you say that during...
The police were...
Sorry, yeah, go on.
And the police effectively were only allowed to go on it by arrangement.
So you're saying that during the course of an average day, a police patrol would not go into that area?
Yes.
Right.
Exactly.
Thank you.
In fact, what happened, the riot kicked off because the police were actually patrolling the area that day in quite large numbers. They were changing over shifts, and somebody driving the car from another area accidentally drove onto the Broadwater Farm estate, and that kicked off the riot because they entered the Broadwater Farm estate. So believe me, when you say senior officers, I'm not sure what rank you're talking about, but a lot of senior, like the chief superintendent in charge of Tottenham, would not officially accept that he had no-go areas.
Right.
But his PCs actually did the job, and I was a chief inspector, so I was in the middle somewhere. So the actual PCs and sergeants that were actually patrolling the ground, they said it was a no-go area, and they weren't allowed to go in there on the instructions of their chief superintendent.
Thank you very much for your calling and enlightening me. There you go. Thank you very much for calling. Morning, caller. You're live on TRE. What's your viewpoint this summer, and who's calling, please?
Morning, Giles. It's Sharon Alicante.
Morning, Sharon.
Maybe there's a couple of points to this. First, maybe we need more black policemen.
Yeah.
Just to wind...
policemen from minorities,
wind up the right.
Yeah.
And then, oh God, I forgot my other point now. Marauders of people bearing machetes. Well, we haven't had marauders of people bearing machetes over the last week or two. But we've had loads of white people doing just as much damage. So, I mean, I'm not saying that... Look, I grew up in Birmingham. Yeah. I went to school in Handsworth, where the riots were. And yes, I will admit there were... possibly still are some no-go areas where it is, it's got to be dealt with. But to say it's across the country and it's widespread, I think is a bit out of order, an exaggeration. I am 73 years old. I spent the first 18 years in Birmingham itself. Yeah. Went back to Birmingham to work after college for a couple of years, and so you could say I'm a bit out of touch because I left Birmingham when I was into my 20s.
Yeah.
But I then went down to North London, so I've taught in quite a lot of built-up areas with high immigrant populations. And whilst there may be an element of truth in no-go areas, I'm not going to deny that because my next-door neighbour, he's from Redditch in Birmingham, and he says there are no-go areas. I personally have never come across them, despite travelling intensely across the city every day for years. But I don't know. I went to a girls' school in Handsworth, and we did have to be careful. But I don't know. I think there's an element of truth in this, but I think it's wildly exaggerated. And I think the far right now are just equalising with their damage and their aggression and nastiness. I mean, so many immigrant people have done fantastic amounts of good in the country, and I just think that they're grabbing hold of a very short straw. That's my point.
Thank you, Sharon, for your point. 952-784-4000. Morning, caller. Thank you for holding. What's your name? Where are you calling from? What's your viewpoint, please?
Short straw.
What's your viewpoint, please? Hello, caller. Yes.
Hello, Giles. Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah. Hello. Yes.
Just come back on Sharon. We're talking about knife crime. We're not talking about violent disorder, which obviously the UK, or let's concentrate on England, shall we? In England, it is predominantly white, so you will get that.
Right.
These idiots that call that violent disorder, they do things like that, but obviously not in great numbers every weekend. Most cities, you will see that. You will see it bubbling on the surface. And if I can just remind you of a conversation that I had with Mr. Brewer back in April, May time, when we both come back from the UK, and I said to him, did I or did I not, that I could feel the tension, and it was like a powder keg.
I remember,
you remember that,
Gary? I remember that indeed. Yes, I do remember you saying
yes,
that.
as I say, I'm a very forward-looking person. And a quick message to John Carrington. John, I've been at NSY, the Black Museum, and would you agree that everyone should see PC Blakelock's overalls and read up on the details of it?
Black Museum, of course, the Black Museum, of course, is the Museum of Scotland Yard, which is quite something, isn't it?
Yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of naive people in the world that live their own lives, and but they don't seem to realise that there's an underclass or whatever.
Got some more calls coming, Gary, but thank you for your call, mate. Thank you. 952 78 4000 is the phone number. More to call you live on TRE. What's your name? Where you know you've gone? Right then. Tim, I've got some WhatsApps to get into as well. If you just hold your fire for a second.
Yes, I will.
Marvellous, thank you so much. Looking into that, what somebody said, morning. I worked in the probation service in West London during the 90s till 2006. We did go into certain estates for safety reasons. This wasn't racial, but estate mentality. If you were a black youth in Brent with exactly the same precons as a white youth, you would be remanded in custody while the white guy would be bailed. Okay? We did go into estates, but we did go into estates for safety reasons. And this one in. Wow, let's just let racists spout lies and praise them. Why are your listeners all middle-aged white men? Okay, I'm not praising anybody, but there you go. Tim, as we are both middle-aged white men.
Well, I'm not middle-aged anymore. I think I've gone
You're
beyond.
Maturing like a fine cheese.
Fine cheese, fine burgundy. Anyway,
burgundy. I wonder what the colour was.
Yes. Now, define no-go area. If
that's a wild guess, somewhere that you're not allowed to go into. How's that?
Yes. Well, the point being that at times, if there was rioting taking place, and there are huge numbers of people on the street, the police will not have matching numbers, and all they will have is protection, in the UK anyway. None of them are, very few of them are tactical firearms guys, so they're unarmed and have protective shields and so on, but they will be outnumbered. Don't underestimate the courage of these guys to be there in the first place. And there they are against what occasionally are weapon-wielding, missile-throwing rioters. And if that's no-go, that is a tactical, almost a military situation where, one has to increase numbers and use other tactics. As far as arresting somebody in what one might loosely call a no-go area, there are ways when one might enact an arrest on somebody who's perpetrated a crime or is suspected of having done so without arousing the whole community's interest and moving into the protection of the individual concerned. And I'm sure the police are very capable of selecting and removing those serious criminals who need to be arrested. No-go areas, yes, you don't want to be in a situation where you're completely outnumbered by those who have a community-spirited, almost tribal wish to protect themselves and to undermine authority.
And it's to the lines we go. Morning, caller, you're live on TRE. Thanks for calling. What's your summer viewpoint?
Yeah, sorry, it's Johnny Meehouse again. I rather think the last time I was talking to you, you were actually talking to Gary, so I was talking to myself. Is that right? I was talking about black policemen or people being recruited to be police officers.
No, you missed. We didn't hear that. We didn't hear that thing.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Sorry, I was talking to myself then. You were talking to Gary.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. In the early 70s, the police spent an awful lot of money trying to recruit black people, or mainly black people, into the police force to show that they were fair and equal and even and whatever. And eventually, I think they managed to recruit about a dozen. They accepted that they weren't up to the standard academically and whatever, but they desperately wanted black people in the police force. And although they gave them sort of extra training and cover and assistance and whatever, all of those recruits left within 3 months. They didn't keep, none of them stayed on. And one of the problems with recruiting black people or minorities is that they get so much stick from their own people it's not worth their while actually becoming police officers. Fortunately, they managed to actually break that to some extent, because there now are a lot of black people, or quite a number of black people in the police service, thank goodness. Just the other point there, your guest was talking about arresting people in no-go areas. With all due respect to him, I don't know what experience he has of practical policing, but it appears very little.
Thank you for your call in there, as always, and sorry for leaving you talking to yourself. Going to go to a break and then back for more Viewpoint.
Viewpoint with Giles Brown.
And we're back. Sorry, I leapt in early. Men of our age. Right then, what have we got? Some WhatsApps. And if you wish to get your viewpoint across, these are the numbers.
To contact TRE, please call 952 78 4000. Email studio@tre.radio. Send us a WhatsApp on +34 645 99 67 95. Message us on Facebook, Talk Radio Europe Official, or tweet us at TRE Talk Radio.
And some WhatsApps. I'm not middle-aged, I'm an old git, thank you, but not got my head in the sand. Note the old far right card gets played again. Fluffy.World Radio. I love this job. And also, let's review the paper. I'm getting it from both sides today. I'm an equal employees. I'm an equal opportunities target today, I think. I love this job. Let's review the papers. Telegraph, Daily Mail, Express and Star. And they call you woke. Let's go to Gary and John 5 times. They are calling in. If you call in, you've got a fair chance of being on. If you wish to get your viewpoint across, then call in. I can't get you on the radio if you don't call in. But thank you for those messages in. Tim, where were we?
Where were we, indeed? Yes, no, I'm not a police officer, so I can't have a practical knowledge.
A lot of people.
Well, which subject are we still on?
The thing about this whole thing about policing, by the way, I mean, I made this point last week with the situation in Rotherham, and to see those police officers with their backs as the rioters, whatever you want to call them, were smashing into the asylum hotel, the hotel being used to have asylum seekers, and they were against a wall. They were backs against a wall, faced with, and call it what you want, but it was a rabble. I'm not going to get into where they were from, whatever. Although the fact that children have been charged because Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, has ex-director public prosecutions. He said they will the rioters would feel the full force of the law and 34 months, etc., even for those online, has proved his point. But when you saw those officers with their backs against the wall and people storming in and smashing stuff up to their lefts, I mean, you have to feel for the officers, because a mob is a difficult thing to police, and it has an energy and a violence of itself, and that can be anything from what we saw on the streets in the UK last week or 2 weeks ago, or it can be at a sporting event, obviously, or it can just be a demonstration gone wrong. Remember the poll tax riots in Trafalgar Square, and I remember friends of mine had been out shopping because that was in the centre of London and got caught. It has an energy and an undercurrent to itself, so it's an incredibly difficult thing to police.
It is, and those people who are engaged in rioting and various offences, either it might be arson or criminal damage or committing acts of violence against police officers or other citizens. There are offences being committed. Whether we're going to actually lay the hands on these people is another matter, but commonly the sort of tribal rioter, somebody with a sort of an extreme case he thinks he wants to make, is going to feel protected by the numbers that are around him. He doesn't feel as if he's an individual committing some ghastly crime. He feels he's part of an entity which has a drive and mentality all of its own, and that is a dangerous situation. But it also has to be considered as, if these individual cases of criminality are not considered, to be a right of people to protest, to sometimes have to protest in a serious way. We can't be sheepishly governed by a police state. We have to have the right of free speech, and we have to have the right of protest. Now, in law, it commonly comes down to a peaceful protest is the terminology that might be used. In other words, when no offences are being committed. But we have to maintain the idea of freedom of speech and freedom to protest. Carrying a weapon is an offence. Any of those other acts that I've already mentioned are offences. The lack of the numbers of police officers is probably partly to blame for this. And these rioting situations are occurring in large towns, largely speaking, and cities. The rest of the country is not manifestly troubled by these incidents, and that is because these, as John would suggest, no-go areas are in fact ghettos, as to use an old-fashioned term, where numbers of people with the same ideology, the same cultural background, have not managed to integrate in any serious way, and therein lies the problem. It may be decades, and possibly longer, before we have a fully integrated world, let alone Oldham or whatever else. It's no accident that these riots are occurring in certain areas. I'm absolutely sure that a statistician or somebody who observes social movement and so on could have predicted exactly where these things were going to occur.
Yeah, I mean, you look at there were protests in Rotherham last year. Mm-hmm. I mean, the journalists went up there last year to interview people.
Yeah,
and so this is the disaffected. These are the people who have been passed by or feel they have been passed by.
Yeah,
and they can't make sense of what is going on.
Yeah,
and so therefore they look and the perceived benefits that new arrivals are getting to the country, and they think that they deserve it, and so you have already simmering tensions like that, and it only takes and I've said this before, I said this last week, it only takes a dreadful incident like as we saw in with the murder of 3 girls, and there are people ready to use that and to inflame, and social media and various platforms have provided an accelerant to that reaction, and then suddenly people want to air their grievances. They feel done by, they feel that they are being looked over, and so this is the only way, and this is what Tommy Robinson said on his social platforms, that this is the only way that these people can get their point across is by causing disturbance, which is a damning indictment of where certain sectors of the public are.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just actually the UK. I mean, you look at what's happening in American politics, where the border wall is possibly going to be re-erected, and so on. That people are fearful of their culture being taken away. Let's say the sort of mildly well-educated English couple who are protesting in the streets in a peaceful manner are concerned about their culture, the whole ethos of their nation being undermined by certain parties. It looks like racism, but in many cases it is simply that they're worried or fearful that their own state of nationhood is under threat. The other thing about it is that the far right versions, the BNP and so on, have gathered people in certain places, the sort of thug element, the dangerous people, by incitement. It's not for nothing that we'll assemble at this place. There is a reason for that, and that is that incitement to racial hatred is the offence, has been contravened by these people BNP, who organise thuggish actions of this kind.
It's the English Defence League of now, of course.
English Defence League.
I mean, it's always an abbreviation.
Yeah.
But as I said before, it's this weaponisation. It's this people are disaffected. And also it's the fact that these platforms, a lot of the platforms are are spreading things that simply aren't true. You know, when we were training to be journalists, we were told try and get 3 sources before you go and do anything, rather than just a knee-jerk reaction. This whole situation of, the Southport attacker was a Muslim who'd just got off a boat the week before, sort of stuff, and had named a name which was actually a made-up name, meant something completely different in Arabic. But boom, it's you've already got a preconceived idea of what the problem is. Something like this happens, and the next thing you know, vumph, and we see what happens. And
if you actually look at it, sometimes one has to look at the root cause of things, and if you look at what has been recently happening, you don't see headlines such as marauding Buddhists, marauding Hindus, rioting sort of one God folk. No. This is actually an Islamic issue. It's a religious issue too. That Muslims are there in huge numbers, ghettoised in certain parts of the UK. You have to face this fact, and that it's not widely liked by English people.
952784000. Morning caller. You're going to be the last caller in the first hour. Who's calling, please?
Felix. Hi.
Hi, Felix.
I basically reject, Giles, your way of looking at this. I reject, yeah. I would say that there is such a thing as Islam in the world, Islam, and there is such a thing as the jihad being waged in the world, a war of conquest. Now, there are a lot of other things happening as well, such as global warming.
Yeah.
But the problem is that this is taking place. The English people have been discriminated against massively by the English.
We're going to run out of time. Those are the bongos.
Okay.
Sorry. Thanks very much indeed. Bye. Right, going to the end of the first half of Viewpoint. Back after the national and international news.
Talk Radio Europe.
Your voice in Spain. Discuss, challenge, inform, comment, Viewpoint on Talk Radio Europe. Giles Brown. Live comment and discussion with studio guests. Viewpoint.
Back for the second half of Viewpoint with me, Giles Brown. We are doing things a little bit differently during the summer months, as I mentioned before. I will normally put an interview or a topic in the second half, which is a little different from what we normally do. A few months ago, in fact last month, I interviewed Michael A. Cook. He's written a new history of the Muslim world. Here for the next 20 minutes or so is that interview. You're listening to Giles Brown on Talk Radio Europe, your voice in Spain. A history of the Muslim world, from its origins to the dawn of modernity, is a panoramic history of the Muslim world from the age of the Prophet Muhammad to the birth of the modern era. It is a new book by Michael E. Cook, and I'm delighted to say that Michael joins us live on the line now. Michael, good afternoon from us. Good morning to you.
And good afternoon to you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Whereabouts are you today? Where do we find you on the planet?
I'm in Princeton, in New Jersey. So I'm probably on about the same kind of latitude as you are. I think Madrid is about the same latitude as Princeton.
Excellent. So,
sitting at home, you can probably see books behind me.
Yes, it's a rather fantastic library. Tell me a little bit. This is obviously a book that is that we need now. A lot of people will think they know the Muslim world, but will only be getting their information perhaps from some misconstrued ideas and the TV. So, is this meant to be a book that outlines the beginning of the Muslim world and perhaps makes it clearer for everyone?
Yeah, and this is meant to be a book that actually backs up into late antiquity before the beginnings of Islam, to set the scene. And then it takes you reasonably systematically from the early 7th century origins through to round about 1800, That's what the subtitle is trying to say. But the fact is, Princeton University Press doesn't like dates in subtitles, so I had to invent that somewhat clumsy phrase. And then at the end, there is a chapter which kind of builds a narrow bridge between 1800 and the present day. But it's not the same kind of systematic treatment.
So when you start with a book like this, we're starting with the impact that the prophet has on the area, the region he's in. Does it explain why he has such an impact? Because obviously this is a time when there are quite a few prophets and shamans and religious men wandering around the place.
Yes. I mean, it is something quite extraordinary. One of the ways in which I handle it in the book is by describing it in a term invented by the financier Nicholas Taleb as a black swan event. The kind of event that nobody could have predicted in advance and that has fantastic consequences. I mean, it's something that you could very easily, if you don't see it as something actually guided by God, you can very easily see it as not happening. I mean, it's a very unlikely event, first in that everybody in that world of late antiquity around the Mediterranean is converting to Christianity. Muhammad doesn't do that. Instead, he comes up with a monotheism which is customized, ethnically customized for the locals, where he is in Arabia. And the other thing he does, Arabia is basically stateless territory. It's full of tribes that don't want to be pushed around. And Muhammad is able to found a state in a very unlikely, remote, rather desolate part of Arabia. So those are a couple of extraordinary things he does. And that then turns into these extraordinary conquests and the spread of Islam.
Is this perhaps because it is a religion, if you like, he brings them under one umbrella and they can apply it to whatever their circumstances is? Because the development, the way the religion spreads so quickly and at this point over the known world, as you'd call the Mediterranean through to sort of India, is quite incredible.
Right. And I think the really crucial thing is that using his religion and his state, he's able to get the Arabs together. I mean, this is this very fragmented tribal society. They spend their lives fighting each other. And this is the one time in history that the Arabs actually come together and become a force that can be directed outwards. So instead of just, raiding villages out there outside the borders of Arabia, they're now actually doing a coherent conquest of the region. And it's the fact that Muhammad, with his state and with his version of monotheism, was able to bring about that unity that no doubt, if it hadn't turned into the conquests, would have been very transitory.
But it just comes at the right time. Other empires are, if you like, waning in their power, and he fills that vacuum, or this fills that vacuum and gives the people this sense of identity. But it will become throughout. If you read Muslim history, there is always a period of the whole nation, the whole tribes coming together, and then they fragment, and it's quite a job to try and keep sort of Muslim states together.
Yeah, I think it's always a job keeping human beings together. And it's particularly a job trying to keep tribesmen who are used to a stateless existence in which, they take care of themselves. Those aren't the most ideal people to build a state out of. So that it's not at all surprising that there's a lot of tensions. It's a very successful enterprise, but tensions. One big problem is that once you've conquered those territories out there, they become the center of gravity of the state, because that's where the tax power is, and that's where the manpower is now, the military manpower. So that, it's a kind of unstable situation, having a capital deep in Arabia in the desert and trying to administer those territories out there, much richer and more powerful territories out there. And that's how we get, that's one component of the First Civil War in the late 650s. And that ends up with the center of power moving from Medina in the Hijaz out of Arabia into Syria. And then the other thing is, of course, in any political system, you're going to have, you're never going to get everybody agreed about the succession when a ruler dies. And that happens here too. And I think the remarkable thing is that the state holds together until 656. So some 30 good years, if you like. And then you get a civil war breaking out over the succession that leads to the Sunni Shiite split.
Yeah, but as you said, for a group, if you like, of tribes who've never had to be bureaucratic to administer, they're kind of, if you like, learning as they go. So it is quite remarkable. And again, there is the spread. I mean, obviously, I'm based in southern Spain. I'm 45 minutes from Malaga. The way that the Islam sort of sweeps the Maghreb, so it goes through, obviously, through Egypt, sweeping aside is it the Seljuk Turk? No, I can't even remember. But it comes through to the Berber, and of course, at the end of in the 8th century, we have obviously the first landings, the establishment of Al-Andalus. So they are in Europe, on a real foothold.
Yes, and I think one of the things they did right, one of their remarkable achievements there, was, as you mentioned, it's co-opting the Berbers. I mean, the Berbers are another refractory tribal population that don't like being pushed around. But a lot of Berbers see the Muslim expansion as a bandwagon it makes sense to get onto. And I think that's what largely powers the initial conquest of Spain. It's a Berber army under a Berber leader that first moves in, and the Arabs kind of come in a bit later. And I think, the history of Muslim Spain is in a way, and that again is a very contingent, chancy matter. I mean, supposing, in the 740s, you get a tremendous reinforcement of the Arab presence in Spain, thanks to an army that went to try and defeat a Berber rebellion. They messed up. They ended up wanting to get out of North Africa at all costs, and they managed to negotiate a deal whereby they could cross to Spain. And that way you get a much stronger Arab presence in Spain. But otherwise, it could have been a very largely Berber enterprise, and who knows what that would have looked like.
Indeed. And of course, meanwhile, in the Levant, they have taken Jerusalem, and that causes a catastrophic effect in central and northern Europe. Of course, Holy Roman Empire is waning, and we get the First Crusades. And once again, most Europeans will know the Crusaders. They will know Saladin, Richard the Lionheart, but they won't know perhaps the background story about Damascus, about the Crusader states, Antioch, Acre, and also going through those Ottoman states, those Turkish states to get to the Levant.
Right. My line on the Crusades would be that they made a certain religious sense in terms of the values that people had at the time. But if you're going to look at them in a sort of cool, strategic manner, they were a pretty stupid idea. Crusades in Eastern Europe, yes, that's contiguous territory, and the impact of those Crusades was very considerable. The ethnic geography of northeastern Europe today still strongly reflects that, whereas there's no trace of the Crusaders in the ethnic geography of the Levant. So you get these Crusader states, but they don't have enough Crusaders to maintain them successfully once the Muslims get their act together and field decent armies against them. I think the enterprise was really doomed from the start. it just takes rather a long time for the doom to unfold.
Indeed. What about the spread west? I mean, are we looking at what we would now describe as Turkey, the Ottoman Empire, the fall of Constantinople? I mean, is that something that you are tackling with this one?
Right. So, I mean, there we're talking about the expansion of the Turks, first coming into Anatolia in the 11th century, and ultimately completely changing the ethnic and religious makeup of Anatolia. And then we get to the Ottomans. What you get in Anatolia is, lots of small states, Turkish states, and one of them happens to have a fantastic future, being the Ottomans. Partly they're well placed geographically, but maybe they had a vision. I really don't know. We don't know too much about their early history, but they're very successful in that they carry on into the Balkans and conquer a large amount of Balkan territory. It's a good time to do it in the 14th, 15th century, because there isn't any really powerful state left in the Balkans, or not, so to speak, south of Hungary. And Hungary sort of rather goes to pieces. The aristocracy are not prepared to allow the ruler to be sufficiently powerful to have a decent army. That's very good for the Ottomans. So you get this very large-scale expansion into the Balkans. And then, of course, they also take the crown jewel of the region, Constantinople, and that becomes their capital. I mean, it's a city that has had a remarkable sort of life as a capital, first of the Byzantines and then of the Ottomans.
But also with the Ottomans, they show the art of empire ruling, because because people will think if it's a Muslim state, because we're looking at this through 21st century goggles, if you like, but they will assume that it's quite restrictive. But in Andalusia, Al-Andalus, we see a certain amount of freedom, and with the Ottomans, they are not subjugating, they're ruling, they have visas, they have a certain amount of autonomy within the people that they are who have become part of the empire. So there's a certain amount of enlightenment, you could almost say, or am I pushing that too far?
A certain amount of what?
Enlightenment, if you like, because they're not ruling by being forceful, for example. Maybe they're taking the ideas from how the Romans ran their empire, for example.
Yeah, I think they're pretty good at both. They're definitely good at the hard power. They conquered all those regions. They faced frequent rebellions. They put those rebellions down pretty ruthlessly. But yes, there is a process whereby the Christian and Muslim societies of the Ottoman Empire reach accommodations. The accommodations are not always, they're not usually on equal terms. They're not entirely stable, but that kind of accommodation is very real. And I think the Ottomans have they're pretty savvy about what they're doing. They can be doctrinaire when they want to be, but they can also be very pragmatic. And they don't mind from time to time totally violating Islamic law when it suits them, like, raising the Janissaries by enslaving children of the Balkan peasantry. That's completely forbidden, because those are protected people, but the Ottomans, they just go ahead and do it.
You can't write any history of the Muslim world without looking at the advances and what they bring to Western civilization: architecture, science, astronomy, medicine, and the arts. I mean, it's a quite incredible sort of part of European culture. You just have to look at the buildings, the buildings that are still left around Europe, and obviously in the previous Muslim, the Ottoman Empire. So how do you describe those? Because that's 3 books at least in itself.
Right. Yes, and I'm not about to write that book, but yeah, I think what is very striking is you go back to the 12th, 13th century, and there's a very real sense in Christian Europe among the intellectuals, the scholars, that the Muslims, they have something we don't have. They're doing it better than we're doing it, and we need what they've got. And you then get this translation movement. I mean, if you like, you can make a parallel between that and the translation movement that gets going from European languages into Arabic in the 19th century. It's the same sense that they have something, and it's something we need, and we've got to get it. So that you get this large-scale translation of texts. Some of them are originally Greek texts, but many of them are not. They're texts written by Muslims in the Islamic world, works of Avicenna and so forth. And it's quite a while before, I don't know the history of this in real detail, but it's a while before Christian Europe stops having a chip on its shoulder, so to speak, about the Muslims doing it better.
You, in this work, you quote several primary sources. How easy or difficult is it to get that sort of information to help you with the book? Quoting from people who are there at the time.
Right. Now, and obviously, for pre-modern history, our record is much patchier than it is for, say, the last 200 years. But one thing that the Muslims did from very early on was write their own history. And some of it is very kind of bare bones, and X was appointed governor of Y. But some of it is very rich anecdotally and gives you, a real kind of taste of what things were like at the time. And since I've been teaching the history, one or other aspect of the history of the Muslim world for must be something like 60 years now. So I've accumulated, I've looked at a lot of things, and I've accumulated a lot of nice, apt quotations and nice anecdotes. And one of the things, in fact, that really kind of psychologically was important in pushing me to write that book was, what do I do with all that material? When in a year's time I retire. And kind of melting it down and recasting it as a book was an obvious thing to do. So that you can write a rich history of the Muslim world, far richer, say, than you can do for Hindu India in ancient or medieval times.
What do you hope that people learn? What do you hope that people take from your book? Is it a greater understanding? Is it to fill in the blanks of knowledge that they may have?
Right. Now, basically, as far as I'm concerned, people can take what they want from my book. I put it there, and it's up to them. But I would think, if they want to know the outline of all that history, they'll get it there. And two, they'll get a real taste of at least some parts of it. There isn't any one grand hypothesis that I'm trying to prove there. It's not that kind of book. But, there are some themes that I'm pushing. One of them has nothing to do, really, very little to do with Islam. It's simply the fact just how difficult it is under pre-modern conditions to establish and maintain states if you don't have a really first-class agricultural territory to tax. And even then, how states they're set up and then they fall down. That's one theme. And the other theme is much more to do with Islam. It's kind of the dynamic of the relationship between local forms of Islam and kind of the central, if you like, normative Islam. And I see it as a kind of, potentially it's a tug of war. You have long periods of accommodation, but then you can get a tug of war setting in because, there's a centrifugal force whereby a local form of Islam will tend to drift off, get mixed up with pre-Islamic ideas that they had in that region. That kind of drifting away. But on the other hand, there's also a centripetal force. Somebody can come along and say to those people, hey, you're doing it all wrong. And, sometimes people respond, just get lost. We don't care what you think. We do it our way. But quite often they listen up and they change. I mean, there's a dramatic example of this with a minor people called the Chans, who still live to an extent in southern Vietnam. And they had developed a really completely way out version of Islam. They had a goddess, they had priestesses, and at a certain stage, I think in the late 19th century, somebody who has been on pilgrimage to Mecca from Southeast Asia and who knows how it should be done passes through the Cham territory and says, you've got it all wrong. And they actually pay attention and they start doing things differently. So I think, and there's this sort of tug of war, so to speak, that takes place between local and normative Islam, I think is a very big part of the history of Islam.
Because it always seems to be changing and adapting, and as you said, you can almost sort of add things on, but you shouldn't. You can't go too far from the main idea, or they will come back and get you if you like. The book is called A History of the Muslim World. It's by Michael A. Cook. Michael, if people want to find you online, is there anywhere via the university or somewhere they can find you? Where's the best place?
I suppose they could find me on the website of my department, and that's the Near Eastern Studies Department at Princeton University. But the fact is that technologically, I'm awfully backward. And, I don't have the kind of presence on social media that I would have if I was 60 years younger.
Well, you'll be able to order the book from our own virtual bookstore. The book is called A History of the Muslim World. It's by Michael A. Cook. Michael, thank you so much for your time today. And that was
Thank you, Giles. My pleasure.
And that was an interview that I pre-recorded a little earlier, as I said, during the summer view. But we try to do things a little bit differently. So, George, thank you for your questions. Please ask your guests about Muhammad and Islam before or after Hijrah to Mecca, particularly verses in the Quran. Strategy changed to violence after Hijrah, where he became stronger with more followers. Most Muslims quote verses from Quran before Hijrah, when the policy was more humane and not primitive. Thank you very much for that. Then a quick break, and then we're into the last half hour of Viewpoint.
Viewpoint with Giles Brown.
And we're back for the second half of Viewpoint. I'm joined in the studio by Timothy Stafford. Tim, after having a few strong con leches or whatever else, we're back. Now, interesting, that wasn't it, about the history of...
Fascinating. Educational.
I think we try. Let's talk about fascinating educational. You wanted to talk about this, because what on earth is happening over in the States?
Well, it's a sort of peculiar eventualities where the absolutely astonishing level of protectionism that must have been applied to Joe Biden's most recent 2 years as president of the USA. That there he is in a state of degeneration, his mind going. And yet, only very recently has it transpired that they're prepared to... they weren't prepared to divulge it. That has become apparent that he was incapable. That in itself should tell us something. That, what else are they prepared to conceal? So anyway, he's out of the picture, certainly in terms of his governance, but also in terms of the running, because now we have Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
And he's chosen a rather questionable running mate. Up against a hugely confident and, shall we say, slightly gangsterish, very, very thick-skinned Donald Trump, who's taken all manner of outrageous insult through the courts and everything else, and still is standing there confidently espousing his America First.
Yeah, but I think Trump's rattled. I think that the whole, because there's two bits. I'm sorry for leaping on you here, Tim. But the way, there's two things here. The way that Democratic Party gaslit most of the world by saying, "How dare you? There's nothing wrong with Biden," and how can you think he's still as sharp as a button or whatever, sharp as a marble, as somebody always says. And then Trump, who is at that point steamrolling into his second term. Of a return of Trump, picks J.D. Vance as his VIP or Veep, whatever they call him, and then he gets blindsided by the Democratic announcement that Biden's standing down, and Harris steps in, puts in Waltz as a middle America type figure, and he seems to have got Trump very, very rattled indeed.
Yes, but I'm not sure about that, actually, whether he is rattled at all, because he's a sort of unrattleable. But that, yes, it certainly altered the whole dynamics of this series of this campaign. But that if you notice, Kamala Harris, whenever she is, which is rare, is drawn into some form of questioning or debate, she will make suggestions, come up with her version, her perception. And when nobody seems to understand quite what she says, she bursts into gales of ridiculous laughter, as if that gives her some sort of affability, some sort of plausibility. Well, I think the American people are asking themselves if they would, or they will have to ask themselves, whether Kamala Harris is going to be a suitable person to negotiate or to meet with the people like Putin, the Chinese, and so on, and give a reasonable account of the strength, the relative merits of the US and the US system. Or would the American people prefer to have the gangsterish Trump, who's obviously an able negotiator and confident with it, as their leader?
Well, he's an able negotiator. Okay, he's self-aggrandizing, to put it mildly. And in terms of negotiating with Putin, we've just had this talking about blindsiding what Ukraine has done with Russia over the past couple of days, and to completely shut down the information network so that they can get making incursions into Russian territory. Therein lies a different situation and the dynamic of the situation in the Ukraine-Russian conflict. But Ukraine's on tenterhooks because they're wondering what sort of administration is going to come in. And if a Trump administration comes in, it's America First protectionist. They won't give aid to Ukraine. With Harris in, then the aid will continue. She's previously been involved in the. It's law. She was a prosecutor, I believe. So therefore, she is used to negotiation. It's not a case that they've got rid of Harris and put in, I don't know, a Kardashian or something, is it?
No, but as far as
that was just a name I picked out of a hat. Now I really have sort of hit the bottom of the barrel with a Kardashian for president.
Well, not to malign Kamala Harris a bit. Her prosecution as a state's attorney, a deputy state's attorney, in prosecution, she would have been in a position where she's rather as the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service, would assess cases to see whether the court case should be brought. As an actual barrister, as we would call it, she's shown no great ability in that area, and she's made a lot of mistakes. Not a particularly able prosecutor, and certainly in the evidence we've seen so far, not able to combat difficult questions as an effective barrister would be very able to do. It's playing out in very peculiar ways, the whole campaign, but in the end, as far as Ukrainian, Ukrainian funding for their ongoing difficulties with Russia, the American electorate will not trouble themselves with that at all. In fact, I don't think that would have any effect because they're not interested in any other nation, not really.
And into the lines we go. Morning, Coolio, live on TRE. What is your summer viewpoint?
Felix.
Felix, hi, Felix.
Question of America is the same as everywhere. The media controls things. When Trump was elected in 2016, the immediate cry from Clinton was that he was an illegitimate president. And after that, there was a whole number of issues which were sprung. One of them, which was Russia, what they call the Russia hoax, and it was a hoax, where he was supposed to have been in Moscow, and he hired prostitutes to urinate on the beds that Obama had slept in. Something like that, roughly. It was a huge, huge affair, but the media carried that. The media controls everything in this world today. If you want to find out what the Muslims were up to in England, as Gary has pointed out,
right,
you won't find it on any of the social media. You'll only find it on Twitter.
Which is
film after film after film of Muslims, especially Muslim youth, running through streets armed with knives, sometimes with hatchets, hammers, and causing havoc, causing real injury on the way. You'll only find that on Twitter. This is why there's such a massive campaign now against Elon Musk.
Yeah.
The media controls business now in our world. And if the media is presenting, just let me finish this point.
All right, I'll let you finish.
If the media is presenting the English working class, who have been terribly abused by immigration, I talk to them all the time here in Spain. I haven't met an English person yet. I've met a few, but I haven't. The great majority have got a great chip on their shoulder by what has happened to them.
Right.
Their areas taken over.
Can't move the chips.
It's like the East End of London by Bangladeshi Muslims.
Right, okay.
So on.
All right.
So the media controls the situation. And we cannot move forward at all until we get an independent media.
And you are saying that the X, which Twitter is run by Elon Musk, has come down on the side of Trump, is an independent media.
Leave Trump out of it.
Why? Yeah, go on. Go on.
Musk stands for, he's an absolutist on free speech.
I'm sorry?
He's a free speech absolutist. Free speech number one and all the time.
Yeah, but free speech comes with... Yeah, go on, sorry. I'll let you finish, Felix, before I come back.
No, it doesn't come with anything. You either got it or you haven't. That's your weakness. That's what doubles you up all the time. You either have got free speech or you don't. You know, I'm sorry to put it like that, but really, that is the issue today. You've either got free speech or you haven't. I could be easily dragged into prison on some of the ideas that I've got in my head.
Yeah,
it's very, very easily from what Starmer has said publicly, and the threats that have been made by the police and by the judges.
Yeah,
we're in a different situation now in the world, and I fear that this is going to get worse as the climate gets worse, because we can move into situations of fascism very, very easily.
Thank you.
No, ask me a question if you like.
No, you've made your point, and I thank you for your call in there, Felix, as always.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. 952784000. That's a very big chip you got on your shoulder there, Tim.
A chip, yeah.
Yeah. No, but the thing, okay, Felix has said, Felix has said about free speech, and people are saying, and Musk came into Twitter, X, whatever. A lot of things have been shown to be not to be true. Young Muslim men running down the streets. I mean, Julie's come back on saying, did nobody see the the solidarity demonstrations that we had? Because like all the, I'm not going to say, what the world needs now is love, 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 but we saw the scenes with the right demonstrations happening in London, which goes to prove that the far right doesn't have the support it thinks it does. But the thing with Twitter and this whole thing with Elon Musk, who's come down heavily on the side of Trump, who's picked a fight with Sir Keir Starmer and the British government, is the fact that you can have free speech, but you can have freedom of speech, but not if it's incitement. You can't. I mean, I can't. If I believe that the world is run by 12-foot subterranean hamsters called Nigel, and we should rise up and call and behead all those who don't believe the world is run by 12-foot subterranean hamsters called Nigel, then therefore I should not be able to go onto any social platform to incite, to misinform. And that is the problem that we have. So there's free. You can have free speech, but it's not. Come on, Tim. You work in the legal thing. It's Hippocratic oath. Do no harm. Basically,
it is. But at the same time that Henry Marsh "Do No Harm" book is actually concerns excising tumours from brains. We're doing the minimal amount of damage to the quality of life afterwards. So. If let's say that the malignancy is to do with extremism or insightful behaviour, then those who perpetrate it need to be excised, shall we say? One of the difficult things with free speech is that we will defend a right-thinking person. A person with a balanced intellect will defend people's right to say it, even though they strongly disagree with what has been said.
Right.
Journalists, particularly able journalists, such as our good friend Giles, defend everybody's right to say precisely what they want to say, as long as it is not giving people a license or an incitement to perpetrate acts of racism, homophobia, and so on. Because that really is despicable and against the law.
To the lines we go. Morning, call. You're live on TRE. What's your name? Where are you calling from? What's your viewpoint, please?
Morning, it's Sharon again. It's Sharon again. Hello. Tim, that's exactly what they're doing, and I totally disagree with you on your assessment of Kamala Harris. I've heard some of the speeches that she's made. If you're a woman in this right-wing world, you notice it's mostly men. As Giles often says, you should be afraid, very afraid, because the amount of power that the Trumpists want to hold over us is what is damaging and worrying. And I've seen the other side of Kamala Harris, and if you do your research, she's actually done some quite good things. I'm leave it to Stephen to clarify on this, because he's got all the details and I can't remember them all. But she's... I disagree with your opinion on Harris, and I see that any man who would support Trump over Harris doesn't give a damn about women. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you for that call, Sharon. 952-788-4000. Yes, Tim.
Yes, no, I can see why you might have come to that conclusion, but this is very far from the case. That I do give a damn very greatly about women. I just think that she, in her particular incarnation, is not the best example of magnificent womanhood that could be standing in this election. One of the great difficulties that Trump's Republican agenda manifesto, if you like, has is a disrespect for the rights of women. And that could play in a big way. And I'm not disparaging Kamala Harris as a woman. It is to do with her efficacy, her talents as a leader.
952-788-4000. Morning, call. You're live on TRE. What's your name? Where are you calling from? What's your viewpoint, please?
Morning, Giles. It's Peter.
Hello, Peter.
I got lost a little bit because my call was trying to go through and I didn't hear the end of it. But the last thing I heard was when you said about incitement. And I presume you're talking about Elon Musk. So what did he do to incite anybody?
No, what I'm saying is he's opening up the platform without verifications. That was my thing, yeah? Because you have the right to... We're talking about the right for free speech, but as long as it does no harm, etc., yeah?
But give me an example of the harm.
Well, if you're looking
it's a free speech platform, and everyone's allowed to say, and they're not making threats. He pulls them down if they make threats. There's no threats. And as for getting into a tiz with the British government, who do the British government think they are to get involved in a conversation with Elon Musk? Elon Musk has nothing to do with policy, and he's entitled to an opinion. He's just a normal... he's not normal because he's very wealthy.
Okay. When Musk starts saying civil war in the UK... Yeah,
that's his opinion. I think there's a civil war in the United States right now. Doesn't have to be with weapons. There's a civil war. There's a cultural war. There's a war in America. That's my opinion.
Any sort of opinions? Any kind of okay. Well, you and I having a lively discussion could be misconstrued as a war, couldn't it, Peter? So put it like that way.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the opinion of the person. It's free speech. You know, it's funny that while I was waiting, the Sharon came on, suddenly that if I vote for Trump over Harris, then I'm a misogynist. So if you're a man and you vote for Harris over Trump, did that make you a misandrist?
Very interesting point there.
It must do. Surely it must swing both ways. But the trouble is with the left, they've got this ideology all the time, and this I don't know whether it's some sort of religious guilt or what it is, but they can never back up what they say with any sort of facts or figures. And when you've been talking about migration, I would implore everybody to go on YouTube, and there's a guy, I think he's a professor at a college, and he does a demonstration with gumballs, right? Or
sorry,
like marbles.
What was it? Marbles?
Gumballs, like marbles.
Right.
They're little coloured figures he puts in this tube.
Right.
And he talks about this thing of migration. We're always being told it's going to reduce world poverty, and we're all going to be better off because of that. Now, on average, each ball he uses in these glass tubes represent 1 million, right? And since 1990, America, US of A, have brought in 1 million people a year. 1 million a year. Now, these figures, I don't know how old they are. They're not that old, but you can add 1 million into Europe. You can add 1 million into countries outside of maybe G20 countries. Those would afford to bring people in. But the World Bank describe the desperately poor in this world as people under $2 a day,
right,
or on less than $2 a day. Yeah. In Africa, 650 million people, less than $2 a day. India, 890 million. China, 480 million. Asia, 810 million. Right. 105 million across Latin America. That's 3 billion people on less than $2 a day. Right. So these are the desperately poor. Now, the desperately poor and sick don't tend to travel or migrate.
Right.
So if you take Mexico, one of the poorest countries and one of the most flooding out of, on average, people in the world on a lower average wage than in Mexico, and this is from the World Bank, they say there's 3 billion of the ones I've just mentioned, plus 2.6 billion under there. So there's 5.6 billion people on this planet living in poverty, right, where the average income is less than they earn in Mexico. So how is that helping? How is that helping anybody? Now, also, when you bring in them 1 million people into America, 1 million people into Europe, 1 million people into other countries that can try and cope with these, the net in the rest of those 5 billion, if you take in births and deaths, every year the net goes up by 80 billion. So how are we helping? And we're taking the very people that could possibly stay in their countries and help people, we're taking those, the ones that Alf and Sharon label as fruit pickers.
Right? I've got some calls coming, Peter, so can we just... Yeah, sorry, mate.
Again, see, you can't argue the figures, can you? You can't come back with any maths, science, the things you screamed at me during COVID, you can't come back on, because these figures are factual. And if you don't see that, then you're an ideologist, or you're just buying votes from the left, and you want poor people to reduce income to less wages to get more poor people. And we're at 5 billion out of 8. So when's it going to be 6 or 7 billion? So, but please, somebody try to come back and destroy those figures.
Thank you very much for your call.
Tell me why migration is a good thing.
Thank you for your call in, Peter. Morning, call. You're live on TRE. What's your name? Where are you calling from? What's your viewpoint, please?
It's Gil from Calpe.
Hi, Gil.
Hello. I just want to comment about what Sharon said, that the women and those who cared about women should vote for Kamala.
Yeah.
Well, a few years ago, former Secretary of State of the U.S., Madeleine Albright, said that all women should vote for Hillary Clinton because she's a woman.
Yeah.
Then people asked her, well, does that mean that all women in France should vote for Marine Le Pen?
Fair enough.
And that shut her up.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that one, Gil. Indeed. Thank you for your calls, and as always, my friend. I'm going to play a quick break, and then we're going to be into the last 3 minutes of Viewpoint.
Viewpoint on Talk Radio Europe with Giles Brown.
Into the last 3 minutes of this morning's Viewpoint, just a quick one. Kamala is several points ahead in the swing states. She's filling stadia to the extent Trump could only wish for. Guess she must be doing something right, eh, Tim? Oh, yeah. And she sounds pretty lucid to me. Also, Morning Cookie claims she's black. She's brown Indian origin. She cannot string a sentence together without her stupid laugh. Tim, your stupid laugh. Off you go.
My stupid laugh. Well, let me just say that single out the idea that if someone does not vote for Kamala Harris, that there's some sort of misogyny going on, or that people should vote for Kamala Harris because she is a woman, is actually divisive in itself. It is a form of racism, in that we don't vote for people because of their gender or because of their colour. We vote for people because they are whatever they are, people who have got a policy and who are showing decency, commitment and kindness. Or drive. If you start saying because she's a woman, or because she's this colour, or because she's of this race or religion, you're committing acts of racism. That is my opinion on that. Forget the idea that she's a woman. She is a candidate. So if you can accuse me of any kind of difficulty with women as politicians, you're entirely, completely, and fundamentally wrong.
Gary's come back. Peter's facts, I love it. Thank you very much. Elon Musk is pointing to some advice for better quality of life. Avoid the Musk-Trump interview. Utter tosh. Okay, fine. Almost out of time. I'm not going to take any more calls in because we're into the last 30 seconds of this morning's Viewpoint. Once again, thank you for all your calls in. It has once again been an enlightening and I was going to say light. It's supposed to be light during summer, but there you go. My thanks, as always, to Timothy Stafford.
A great pleasure, Giles, and I didn't expect you to come in your Speedos.
Yes, well, that's my Andrew Tate thing, you see. It's my homage to Andrew Tate, who threw his particular weight, as he was photographed in his particular pink Speedos. Go look it up. He will never pole vault for the French national team, put it that way. I'll be back tomorrow with Let's Talk. Thanks for all your calls in. This show will be repeated at 6 o'clock, and we have Stephen Ritson waiting in the wings up next. Have a great rest of your Tuesday. I'll see you tomorrow.
The views expressed on Viewpoint by invited studio guests and callers do not constitute an opinion endorsed in any way by Talk Radio Europe.
You've been listening to a TRE production. If you've enjoyed this programme, there'll be another episode waiting for you next week, right here on this platform, where you can also access our extensive back catalogue of shows and interviews. For more information on our live programming, social media channels and apps, and how to contact Talk Radio Europe, please visit TRE.radio.